All right, this is episode 9 of the Take Me on Tour podcast. This is another kind of tour recap episode. So I'm solo on this one as I feel like that's what works best for these. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, my name is Steven and I'm a freelance touring crew member. And I've been touring for 10 years now as of June of this year. And this podcast is all about the touring music industry. Some episodes are with guests such as fellow touring crew and possibly even some band members in the future. Hopefully we can get that going at some point. And sometimes my buddy Logan and I hop on here just to talk about industry-related topics, which we've done for a few episodes in the past. And the last one we did was honoring the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne. I'll link that below if you want to check that one out. We talk about the legacy of Ozzy, the Osbourne show, the different years of Ozfest that we got to attend, and all the bands Ozzy and his organization helped throughout his career. And we decided to put that episode together 2 days after we found out that Ozzy unfortunately passed away, and it was just one thing that we wanted to do to honor the Prince of Darkness, as I feel like I wouldn't even be here doing this podcast if it weren't for Ozzy and Black Sabbath. But today's episode is about my recent tour in Australia. I was drum teching for the band Memphis Mayfire. For those who have been here before, you probably know and have heard me talk about mainly doing merch. That's what I've been doing for the last few years now, but drum teching has always been where I want to be. But it's just not the path I was given throughout my touring career. And, you know, perhaps I could have tried harder in the beginning to, you know, really take that path. But you kind of have to just take the opportunities that are given to you. And, you know, in the beginning, it was mainly tour managing. I'd say, you know, from my very first tour ever with the band Shattered Sun doing Mayhem Fest back in 2015, I was tour managing without really even knowing what a tour manager was, but that was my foot in the door. And every gig I got after that was kind of a tour managing gig. These were smaller bands at the time, you know, club bands and theater bands. I never really did tour managing at the arena level or in anything above, you know, theater level, but a lot of metal bands that I tour managed, you know, Cradle of Filth, Death Angel, Shattered Sun, American Head Charge, Wednesday 13, Ginger, you know, to name a few. Those are the kind of level of bands that I was doing, you know, from 2015 to probably 2020, right when the pandemic happened. The last one I did was Graveyard, supporting Opeth. And that's when things started to become, you know, more of like TM/merch gigs where you're doing two jobs. You're tour managing, but since the bands are smaller and they don't have as much of a budget or as much space for crew, you know, they ask you to do sometimes 2 or 3 jobs, which I think 2 is the max you should do. But yeah, I was doing TM and merch for Graveyard, did TM and merch for a band called Belphegor, who are from Austria. And then post-COVID, I kind of just fell into doing only merch gigs. It was kind of just the way things happened. I got my first gig right after COVID working for Blue October. And that was like 3 long months of just doing merch. And then on the last 2 days of that tour, I heard that there was a position for Breaking Benjamin, and next thing you know, I'm working for Breaking Benjamin pretty much nonstop since 2021, I would say. So yeah, about 4 years now. I think I'm hitting my 4-year mark this year with Breaking Benjamin. So that's kind of what it just became. I just became strictly merch, and it's not what I ever planned to do, but Breaking Benjamin gave me the biggest opportunity of my career, and you're not going to say no to that. So that's kind of where I've been. They've treated me really well, and I've been enjoying it. So, you know, one of the reasons that I didn't want to tour manage anymore too was there was a lot of mask restrictions, and that was causing all sorts of issues. I remember being on tour with Theory of a Dead Man, and you know, our tour manager getting into arguments with Florida locals who were like, "We don't wear masks, you know, this is Florida, we're an exception," and you know, almost calling the show off just because, you know, the stagehands don't want to wear masks, and it was just a whole thing that I knew that I didn't want to deal with. So that's another reason I didn't want to tour manage. So anyway, I've been doing merch strictly for the last, you know, going on 4 years now, but I've always wanted to do drum teching. I can remember since 2017, I've been asking other people if they know anything about drum teching gigs. It's just not anything that ever came to me. But yeah, Breaking Benjamin has been great to me. They've treated me really well. Things have only gotten better over the years. And if I ever left, it would likely be because I was pursuing a full-time drum teching gig, which I think a lot of the people know that's really what I want to do. But I just started recently getting experience in drum teching. I've played drums, you know, almost my whole life, but being on tour as a drum tech is different, and you need to have experience. And obviously they want to see that when they're hiring you for a gig. But as far as working for Memphis Mayfire, you know, this was my first time, and They're managed by the same management as Breaking Ben, which is how I got the gig. It's our tour manager our tour manager is also part of management. So he manages Memphis Mayfire. They needed somebody for the upcoming Australia tour. He knows that I've been wanting to get into drum teching. He felt like it would be a good fit, and he, texted me like 2 days before one of our last Breaking Ben tours started, and he's like, "Do you want to go to Australia with Memphis Mayfire?" And before I even knew the rate or very many details, I pretty much just agreed to do it without even really knowing what I was getting into. I just knew an opportunity like this, they don't come very often, especially for merch people. Merch people are typically kind of stuck in the US or at least North America. If you're a merch person and you get to tour outside of North America, you're very fortunate. Most of the time people have like a European merch person and a US merch person, or, everywhere they go, they kind of have a merch person. That's one of the positions that you don't really get to travel, globally with the band most of the time. So the only other time I've been out of North America was in 2018 with Devil Driver, and I didn't even really have a role. I was kind of just extra help. I was hired to be a TM assistant, which I kind of just ended up being, I guess you could say that, kind of like a band assistant. I was helping, Des Fafara and his wife Anastasia most of the time, just, showing them where the dressing room is, showing them where their artist tent was, where they're going to do the signings and all kinds of stuff like that. And we just did a small run with, it was like the European festival circuit, the Europe and UK circuit. So we did things like Bloodstock Festival, Motoculture, Alcatraz. And this was my first time in places like Italy and Spain and England. And it was mind blowing to say the least. I mean, I just loved the experience and have always wanted to go back to anywhere really overseas. So Australia is one that's been, on my mind a lot lately. And I'm just wondering, like, when is it that I'm going to be able to go to Australia, especially as a merch person? We don't really get those opportunities. So when this came across, I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I mean, really wasn't going to say no. And thankfully I was available for it. A point to take away from this for those who want to get into touring is that we aren't all where we want to be. For some people that is the case, they're guitar guys and they're guitar techs and, they're working for the bands they want to and all that. But I think most of us are really grateful to be touring and have the job that we have, but not all of us have landed the gig we want. Some of us that may never happen, and it goes for working with certain bands as well. Some people want to be backline techs, and some people want to be tour managers, and some want to be audio engineers, but sometimes they're just doing, completely different jobs. And sometimes you just kind of get stuck in that cycle like I did with merch. But there's other people that we've toured with who, they're like a production assistant or something, and then you find out they're actually an audio engineer and they really want to be doing audio. And you kind of just, as I said before, you have to take the opportunities that are given to you, and hopefully they'll lead you to where you want to be in the future. And of course, networking is a big part of that, telling people what you do and speaking up and networking with other fellow crew people and getting the word out there that you actually want to do this. And I've done that a lot myself, which is kind of how I got the drum tech gig. I kind of just started telling people I wanted to be a drum tech, and next thing you know, I get, an offer to do Australia as a drum tech, which that came a lot sooner than I expected it to. And as I said, that also goes for, working with the bands you want to. Not everybody gets to work with their favorite band. I know one guy, Austin Zangi, who I've known for quite a few years now, was working for his favorite band is Seether, and he's like Seether's LD. And I remember messaging him one day. I was like, dude, you have no idea how fortunate you are to work for your favorite band, because it just doesn't always work out that way. It's not like you get into the touring industry and everything's just perfect. You're doing the gig you want at the level you want, working for the band you want. And my point being that once you get here, it's not like the grind just stops. We have a lot of the same struggles that other people would face in any other line of work, feeling stuck in the position that you're in, or wanting to work your way up, or not being exactly where you want to be. But anyway, our tour manager, Jerome, has known for years that I wanted a drum tech, so they needed someone. So he offered it to me. I took it, and it was an amazing experience, to say the least. We were doing a co-headliner with Atreyu, which I just realized looking through socials today that these bands have already done a co-headliner last year, I think, and I think it was in the US, if I'm not mistaken. So they had a relationship with each other that I didn't even really know about. But it was only 5 shows and 2 days off for a total of, I think, 11 days, maybe 10 or 11 days, including travel. And we did Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and Perth. And I actually almost didn't make this tour. My passport was about to expire when I got the gig, and this caused issues with my visa, which caused issues with my flight, and just became a whole thing, So things were so down to the wire that when I went to the airport, I just kind of sat there in hopes that my visa would come through at the last minute. So I get to the airport and I'm trying to check in. They won't let me check in because it's tied. Your passport is tied to your visa, and as soon as your visa gets approved, then it gives you the green light to check in. It shows that your passport is good to go, and so we were going to actually try to fly me to LA, and I was going to go to LA to buy more time just to see if my passport would get approved in time. So this is 7 p.m. my time, but it's like 8 a.m. in Australia time. So they're working like crazy over there to get it approved, and I'm like, well, I can go to LA and just sit there, and that'll be like 10 or 11 a.m. your time. But unfortunately, they wouldn't even let me board the plane because my final destination was Australia, and you need, a visa to go there. And it was all tied in together. So I end up, going to the airport. I sit there for, 2 hours, and, you have to board the plane no later than 45 minutes before it departs. That time came. So I was like, okay, I guess I just got to go home. And I go back home, and my visa ends up coming in later that same night around midnight. So yeah, just, way too late to make it in time, but it actually kind of all worked out because the band and crew flew in a day before me. The first day was supposed to be there to get all the gear and work on it, work out all the kinks and have like a tech/production day to make sure everything worked. But for some reason, the gear was caught up in customs, I think. I'm not too sure, but everyone ended up just having a day off, and I actually showed up on show day and got to spend the same amount of time with the gear as everyone else. So I really didn't lose anything. It kind of just all worked out that way. So I think some of the guys got tattooed, and they just went to eat. They sat in a hotel all day basically. So I really didn't miss out on anything. So even though I was a whole day delayed, I really didn't miss anything at all. But this was like a 27-hour travel day or something like that just to get to Brisbane. When you include all the layovers and all the Ubers and everything. I flew from Austin to LA, which was 3 hours. LA to Sydney was almost 15 hours. Sydney to Brisbane was another 3 hours. And once I got to Brisbane is where the no sleep schedule pretty much started, because sleeping on a plane is never easy. And it's not even like it's real sleep. You're kind of just, nodding off and in and out of sleep and watching movies. And it's just absolutely uncomfortable. This is on one of those really large planes that has, it's got 2 middle aisles, so it's got 3 seats on the left, 3 in the middle, and 3 on the right. I had plenty of people warn me about how tiring an Australia tour can be. We have to fly to we have to fly to every show, which is almost every single day. And after the show, you go into the hotel, you shower, and you nap for a few hours, and then you have to be ready by like 7 or 8 a.m. for lobby call to head to the airport. So I already knew all this. My touring friend Cowboy, who I've talked about and actually done a podcast episode with him, I called him before I did the tour, and I was like, hey man, what can you tell me about Australia? I know you've done it more than a few times. What can I look forward to? And that's when he told me, man, just be prepared to be tired the entire time. And he explained the whole thing, finish the show, load out, go to the hotel, nap for a few hours, back, for lobby call, go to the airport, sleep on the plane. And it's exactly as he said it would be. And I hung in there for a while until maybe about halfway through the last 2 or 3 days, I was really feeling it. I felt like I could fall asleep anywhere at any time. I mean, even if it was in a lobby chair or an airport chair or anything, I was just really feeling the effects of, all that jet lag and flying constantly. And it was really, really exhausting. But one of the fortunate things about this tour was that luckily all of the gear was being trucked to each show for the first 4 shows. So it was only the last show where we had to fly with all the gear. So when we were with Devil Driver, that's what we were doing. Every time we went to a different show until we got a bus there in Europe, we were, carrying cymbals and guitars and drum pedals and all that kind of stuff. But for the first 4 shows, the stuff was being trucked from city to city, so we just flew. So that actually made things a lot easier. So the only thing we needed to take with us was our luggage. So we would load our luggage up into like a trailer that was hooked up to like the back of a Sprinter van. And it was basically all of Memphis, Mayfire, and all of Atreyu traveling kind of all as one. I mean, we would all show up. We had an Australian tour manager. So we have a US tour manager that's with us. And then we had two US tour managers, so one for Atreyu, one for Memphis, and then we also had an Australian, kind of like a promoter rep slash tour manager who kind of, you know, took us, kind of took control of everything as far as getting us to the airport, organizing the hotels, organizing the van, and organizing all that stuff. But it was still a little bit chaotic, just considering I'd never done anything like that. But yeah, just really grateful for the tour managers and Jesse, the Australian tour manager, who ended up knowing a lot of the same people I know back in the US because he's toured there. And it all kind of just, the more you start talking to people, you realize how small of a world it is. And he just knew so many people that I had toured with. So I really enjoyed just talking to him about all the people he knew. And we started texting each other, look who I'm with. And it was a cool experience. But if you're unfamiliar with Memphis Mayfire, they've been around for quite some time now. I think close to 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. I've never been super familiar with their music, but just known who they are for years. And I was teching for Jake Garland, who's been their drummer as long as I've known about them. We actually did a tour. I did a tour with them in 2017. It was Warped Tour 2017. I was with the band Fire from the Gods, and I remember seeing Jake on our bus a couple of times. And since this is an overseas tour, he was using a backline kit, so he brought his cymbals and his pedals, and as most drummers do, some even bring their own snare drum. But yeah, only cymbals and pedals. So once I got to the first show, we set up the kit together, spiked all of the gear on the rug, which if you don't know what spiking is, it's just, once you place everything on the drum rug, you take spike tape, which is just really thin gaff tape, and you spike, all the legs, all the placement, you spike it around the pedals, you spike it around the cymbal stands. So you're just marking where everything goes. That way, in the next show, you just roll the carpet out and everything's marked. You've got your snare goes here, your throne goes here, bass drums go here. So that's what spiking is. So I spiked the rug, and then I took photos for reference, just in case he wasn't there the next day. I could, look at the photos for reference on where he likes things, just in case anything moved, like any of the memory locks didn't stay, or considering when we packed it away, if anything got moved. So I just used that for reference. And Memphis is a very hands-on band, and Jake was there to help me with anything I needed, but I really actually preferred doing it myself, considering I needed the experience. I really just wanted to be able to knock it out without depending on anybody. I would just, text him questions or send him photos if I had a question about anything. But he was great, man. Great to work with. And I wish it would have been longer, but I really enjoyed my time working for him. And right after soundcheck, when we got there to Brisbane, right after soundcheck, they had some exotic animals that were there at the venue, and these were brought to us by the Wildlife Headquarters Zoo. And I think this is something that Atreyu's camp set up. I'm not 100% on that, but I remember hearing that from somebody that it was kind of already in the tour schedule before the tour even started. So I guess this is something that Atreyu maybe is familiar with, and they've been there before. But either way, I'm so glad they did, because they brought a koala, an echidna, a quokka, and a couple of various reptiles. And, whenever you go to Australia, I think most people, what they want to do is they want to see animals. They want to see, I think Australia, that's what most people think of, is koalas and kangaroos and all that kind of stuff. So it's like 2 hours after sound check, I'm already holding a koala, which might have just been hoping that I could pull it off the rest of the tour. So kind of got that out of the way, and the people from the zoo were really great, really informative, and really, really nice. Let us spend as much time as we wanted to holding all the animals, and answered any questions we had, and really enjoyed that. And next time I go, I'd definitely reach out to them to see if we can set the same thing up for whichever band I'm with next time. But after Brisbane, we flew back to Sydney, which is where we all flew in from LA the first time, but that's where the second show was. So we flew from LA to Sydney, Sydney to Brisbane, and then Brisbane back to Sydney, which, I don't know, it's just kind of the way it worked out. But we were lucky enough to have a day off in Sydney. And of course, we did the tourist thing and went to the Opera House. And I've always known what that building is, but I mean, I'd seen it in photos and stuff, but it wasn't until I got closer to that, that day off, that I started to realize what it was and how iconic of a building it is. And we weren't there for all that long. Took some photos. We went, basically got there from the airport, went to the hotel, checked our luggage in, went straight to the Opera House, had some dinner and drinks, and walked around and did the gift shop and took some photos there next to the Opera House. And that's kind of all there was to do. I mean, once you see it, it's kind of like, once you've taken a photo, it's not really anything else. So we mainly just ate and drank there right next to the Opera House the rest of the night. And Maddie, the singer for Memphis Mayfire, and his wife actually got to have dinner inside the Opera House, which I didn't know that was an option, or I would have done it. I think it probably would have been better as a big group dinner, rather than just me and a couple of other crew guys. But yeah, he sent us a photo later of him and his wife sitting inside the Opera House having dinner. But after that, we just went to a bunch of speakeasies for the rest of the night. And I will tell you right now, speakeasies are not my thing. I barely even know what they are, to be honest with you. But, every single one of them is kind of hard to find, which I think that's kind of what they're known for. But just not my thing. The drinks are just insanely overpriced for me. And I've never been much of a drinker to begin with. I don't know or really care about, aged bourbon or this kind of whiskey or this kind of whatever. I just don't. I drink, but not enough to care to spend, $25 a drink, and that's how much these drinks are in Australia. And so I think it was, I don't know, $17 to $20 US for these drinks. And just when it's mostly filled with ice, yeah, I don't really care to drink that much. So we were just at a bunch of speakeasies the rest of the night, and we had a show the next day in Sydney. So this is actually one of the days that we didn't have to wake up super early to be at the airport. We just had to wake up for lobby call to go to Loden. So as we're on our way to the venue, the driver tells us that the University of Sydney, which is right next door to the venue, was used in the Harry Potter films. And I guess people think it was used as Hogwarts. And the guy sounded pretty confident when he was telling us. So I was over here thinking, man, this building is from Harry Potter. And like, we looked up photos there, me and the guitar tech, Andre, and we're looking up photos, and he's like, yeah, it is. Check it out. He was like, it looks exactly like it. And if you Google it, I guess it's a common mistake that people make. People think, I guess it was used as Hogwarts, but if you look into it, you just find out that it's not. It just happens to look a lot like it. So this whole time I thought it was, though. And I even told a couple of people it was, but turns out, I guess he was misinformed. We were misinformed, but it is a really cool building, and it does look a lot like it if you compare the two photos. But yeah, I'm just going by what he said. But I'm glad I looked into it, because that way I don't keep telling people that I was, on part of the Harry Potter set or something. But anyway, we took photos, took videos. I mean, it's like I said, it's still a really cool building. And then we went back and did the show, and nothing too memorable about this show that I can remember. It was just another show. And then I think after that was Melbourne. I think we in the US pronounce it Melbourne, but I think it's Melbourne, if I'm not mistaken. So Melbourne and Adelaide were the next two shows. And I don't remember anything significant about those two shows. It's crazy because there's only 5 shows, but yet I can't remember, even 2 out of the 5 shows on anything that happened. But yeah, nothing too significant. The venues were fine. Some of the stage space was rather small. But either way, I mean, it was cool to see all these Australia venues. Like I said, I just never been to any of them, so everything was kind of a new experience for me. But one of the surprising things being in Australia that I didn't expect was the 24-hour access to food. I mean, everyone knows in the US we're known for being overweight and unhealthy, but Australia is the one over here with 24-hour McDonald's, 24-hour Burger Kings and KFCs, and you just walk into them. They're like located downtown in all these cities, and every time I would be done with the show, I would, look up food on Google, and sure enough, it said, Burger King's open 24 hours, McDonald's, whatever, and Burger King's is actually called Hungry Jack's over there, but it looks exactly the same. I can't remember the story. Somebody explained the story to us on why it can't be called Burger King, but same logo, more or less, same font, same food for the most part, but it's called Hungry Jack's. But I will say that was a huge plus for post-show food, because nothing worse than being hungry with no food options after a show, even though late night eating isn't really good for any of us. But, when it's 1 a.m. and you just haven't eaten since like 5 p.m., 6 p.m., because that's typically the last opportunity you get to eat, which is, right before changeover, right before doors, showtime, all that stuff. So any food options are great to have. So grateful for that. Their bacon isn't anything like in the U.S. though. In the U.S. we have bacon. I mean, everybody knows what U.S. bacon is, I think. But over there in Australia, it's more like what we'd call Canadian bacon here in the U.S., or ham. It looks kind of like ham. So that was a little weird to me. But I mean, I didn't care. I was still grateful to be eating food at all. At 1 a.m, I figured, the U.S. is the only ones that have that guilty pleasure of having fast food that late at night. And they also seem to have eliminated all the plastic from their restaurants. So it was all paper bags, paper cups, paper straws. So that was something we're not used to in the US, which I think the US is one of the only countries that's really behind on this, but yeah, that was something that was easily noticeable as well, as everything's paper, even the lids to the cups. But anyway, before we left, we actually got lucky that we didn't fly out until midnight. So we almost had an extra full day off on the last day we were there. Our flight was like midnight, so we had to leave the hotel, I think at 8 o'clock, get there and check in all the gear and all that stuff. So it kind of gave us an opportunity to buy souvenirs, which I really didn't know if I was going to have time to do, because everything is just like go, 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 as I was talking about with all the flights, and almost no time to do anything except for check into your hotel and then get to the venue for load-in, and then right back to the hotel, right back to the airport. So I didn't really know if I was going to have time, but we stopped at this souvenir shop the day before that last day. I woke up early before the show, before we had to do load-in, and I went to this souvenir shop to see what they had, and we had really limited time. We only had about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and I'm glad we ended up going there, because the employees are the ones that told us about Rottnest Island, which was probably the coolest experience of the whole trip. We had no idea what it was, and we wouldn't have been able to go if we wouldn't have stopped at that souvenir shop the day before. So we're there, and we're talking to the employees, and they're asking where we're from, and we're like, yeah, we're just here from the US for work. We only have one more day here. And they're like, oh, okay, are you going to Rottnest Island? And we're like, well, what's that? And we never heard this. We have no clue what they're talking about. So they explain what it is. And they're like, yeah, it's this island where the quokkas primarily live, and telling us about the whole thing. Oh, you got to go. It's like, something you should definitely do before you leave. And I'm like, well, how do you get there? And they're like, well, you have to take a ferry, and the ferry's not anywhere near here. You have to take an Uber there. And it just sounded like it was going to be too much trouble. But I was like, talking to Andre, the guitar tech, and he was like, if you're willing to do it, I'm willing to do it. And we scrambled to buy tickets, and that's where we ended up spending our last day off. We were even bugging the venue staff, like, hey, do you know how we can get to Rottnest Island? And of course, they're local, so they were super familiar with how it works, and telling us, this ferry leaves out of here, but, you're better off leaving out of this one, because it's closer and it'll be less boring of a ferry ride and all that stuff. So they helped us look up tickets. I was starting to panic because a lot of them were sold out, because I guess it's a very popular thing to do there. So we're panicking. But we ended up buying tickets, and I'm so glad we got to go. I'm so glad they decided to ask if we were going. If we wouldn't have stopped at that souvenir shop, this wouldn't have even been a thing, And Atreyu already had tickets, and they were going, and we didn't know, because even though we're doing everything together, they're still kind of operating on their own. And I guess somebody in their camp knew about it. I don't know how. Maybe they had been there before, but they had like a group of 6 people that are already going. And for us, for Memphis Mayfire, only me and Andre wanted to go. But either way, I'm glad we ended up being able to go. And so Rottnest Island, it's located right outside of Perth, and it's primarily where the quokkas live. And if you look it up on Google, quokkas are described as a small wallaby-like marsupial. And some say they look like kangaroos, or some say they look like rats. I guess, I don't know. I've seen quokkas before, so I guess I knew what to expect. I guess they do kind of look like a small kangaroo, but super friendly. They're all over the island, and you're not supposed to feed them or touch them. They have signs all over the island saying not to feed them or anything. But they come up to your table looking for food, and I guess they know where to find food. As far as like the restaurants there and all the tourist spots, they come up to your tables, and one even came up to our table and started taking Andre's food. And they're not aggressive to the point that they'll attack you, or they're not dangerous or anything, but they'll definitely take food when they get the chance. So we had one of them, reaching for Andre's sandwich right underneath his chair, which was crazy. I think he got a couple of pieces of bread from him. So it was a really cool experience seeing them that close. They just run wild there. That's where they're primarily located. That's pretty much what Rottnest Island is known for. And the island itself is way bigger than I thought. It's miles and miles long, and getting around the whole island isn't easy. And that's something I didn't expect. We were told you have to start really early or you won't make it back in time. There's a few different ways to do it. You can take there's like a bus that goes around the island, or you can rent a scooter or rent a bike or an electric bike. And we really wanted to do the scooter, considering we got there, I think around 12:30 or maybe 1 o'clock, something like that. And you really have to like I said, make sure you make good time around the island, because if not, the ferry was leaving at 4:30, and if you don't make it back in time, you're stuck there for a whole day basically until the next ferry arrives. And I had a flight to catch and all that stuff, so getting stuck on the other side of the island was not something that I wanted to happen to us at all. So we go into this bike shop and we wanted to rent electric bikes. Well, we wanted to rent scooters first, but scooters were all sold out. I think they only had one left, and so neither one of us wanted to be the guy with the scooter and the other guy not have one. So then we tried to rent electric bikes, which much more expensive. And then on top of that, they wanted a $200 Australian deposit. So I think that's like, I don't know, 160 US or something like that. So I guess neither one of us wanted to put, deposits down and put all these holds on our card and everything. So we ended up renting, the classic bike, which, pedaling our way through the island, which got exhausting really fast. I couldn't tell you the last time I rode a bike, but that was kind of just our only option, especially considering the amount of time that we had. So we just went with the bikes and rode around the area that we started at until we got tired. And we kind of just came to the conclusion that, if you go any further into the island, you're not going to see much more anyway. I mean, we saw a couple of different parts of the beach, and we were even told by somebody there that there's not really restaurants in there. She was like, if you're going to end up going and riding throughout the island, you need to take food with you, buy something here. That way you have something to eat while you're, in the middle of the island. So we knew that there wasn't at least any restaurants to see or anything across the other half of the island. So we just kind of stayed in the area that they start you at and just rode around the area, saw the quokkas, saw the beach, had some food, had some coffee, had, Andre had a smoothie, and just kind of chilled out there for a few hours until the ferry was leaving. So that ferry ride was insane, by the way. Riding from the ferry there was just crazy. I mean, people were throwing up, and you had to like hold on to the railing, and it was just wild. But going back, it wasn't so bad. But yeah, I'm really glad we were able to do that. And I just, for the amount of time that I was there, I was really happy with my experience and all the things I got to do for my first time in Australia, and the fact that I was only there for 7 days or so. If it weren't for the Atreyu guys setting up that whole animal encounter and the employees at the souvenir shop, I mean, this whole trip could have looked a lot different. I'm really glad we got to do the things we got to do for being there 7 days. So the only thing I didn't get to do was see a kangaroo, but maybe next time. I mean, it's not like they're, walking the streets or anything. So I do hear that you can see them in the wild if you go far enough, but away from the city. But, we're in the city the entire time pretty much. So, and another thing that I didn't expect from this trip was the weather. I think everyone thinks hot weather when they think Australia. And I didn't do it intentionally, but I didn't even bring any kind of jacket or hoodie. And come to find out, it's actually winter during this time for Australia, since it's in the southern hemisphere. And something I probably learned in school at some point, but I just didn't think about it. So I ended up having to buy a hoodie, which it wasn't too bad. I mean, I spent $40 on a hoodie, and the weather was probably equivalent to what a Texas winter is like, where it gets, about 32 degrees Fahrenheit at the coldest. So nothing really too bad. I probably could have made it without the hoodie, but I figured I'm going to be here for a week. I might as well just buy one. So yeah, if you're ever in Australia, between June and August, just know to bring a jacket, because it is wintertime. But that's all for my trip to Australia. I had a great experience, and I had no idea how many more years were going to go by before I had the opportunity to do something like that. So I got to thank Jerome and Grandview Management for reaching out and giving me that chance to experience, another country for once. I also have another episode with photographer Dominique DaCosta coming out soon. She works for Breaking Benjamin, as well as Asking Alexandria, Daughtry, Lakeview, and a couple of other bands. And I really wanted to have her on the podcast, because she's someone who supported Take Me On Tour since the beginning. So be on the lookout for that coming out soon. And until then, you can find me on all social platforms at Take Me On Tour, or you can visit takemeontour.com to find everything all in one place. And as always, I appreciate any of you for tuning into this podcast and supporting me or Take Me On Tour in any kind of way. And that's it for now, and I'll see you guys out on the road.